Oh, hello. If you are a Eurovision superfan, this is the quiz for you. And if you happen to be an ASMR fan too, then so much the better. Welcome to Truffle Trivia ASMR and another gentle jaunt around the world. If you've seen other videos on this channel, you may be familiar with what we normally do, which is choose one country and offer a range of quiz questions about it on a range of topics. This time we flip the idea on its head. We've got one topic and many different countries to consider. I'm going to ask you 20 questions in a series of 6 rounds, and the answer to each question is a country that has participated in the Eurovision Song Contest. Each country may only be the answer to a question once. So through a mixture of your Eurovision knowledge, looking at the map to help, and also process of elimination as we go through, you will be able to get some of the answers, I hope. Now, of course, channels like this only thrive with your interaction, so I would be absolutely delighted if you comment as we go. Tell me which questions you get right, any questions that you'd like to make further remarks about, or even corrections to something that you think I haven't got exactly spot on. I'd be thrilled to hear from you. One thing worth saying is that I won't be asking you to identify any songs or singers. However, if you are into the music itself, then do check out the piano medley, which is also a quiz all about the winning songs, which you can find on this channel, and you can follow the links in the description and up in the corner. But without further ado, let's get into round 1. I'm just going to conceal the map for a moment and just write a few notes to help us focus our minds as we go through the questions. And the first round of questions, a round of 4 questions, I'm going to call first and last. Question 1. Which country had the first winning song that was not sung in their own language? You may be aware that for many years there was a rule that participating broadcasters could only submit a song that was in an official language of that country. These days they can sing in any language and many select English. When was the first time that the winner was not in the official language of the country? Question 2. Which country hosted the first contest to be broadcast in colour? Now, of course, that is a bit of a grey area, if you'll pardon the pun, because just because it's broadcast in colour doesn't necessarily mean it's received in colour everywhere, because the transmitting country may have had the technology for colour broadcasts, but the recipient countries may not have done. Anyway, there is a contest which is officially the first one broadcast in colour. Question 3. Which country's first win was not shown in a neighbouring country because they cut the broadcast when it became obvious who the winner was? If you're only familiar with the way that Eurovision is scored these days, you'll know that the announcement of a clear winner is saved till the very, very last moment. Well, years ago, it wasn't the case. Years ago, it could be obvious, even with 5 or 10 minutes to go, that one particular country had won. And this is what happened on this occasion. And question 4, just before we run out of space on the page. Which country has come last the most times in the grand final? So, I will give you a moment to think about those answers, and let's go through the answers one round at a time so you can keep a tally. Question 1, we're looking for the winning song that was not in the native language for the first time. Question 2, the first broadcast in colour. Question 3, the first win for a particular country that was not shown in a neighbouring country. And 4, the country that has come last the most times. Let's take you through the answers then, and as we go, I'm going to just put a little mark on the country that is the answer so that we can see that it has been used up, so to speak, and will not be available for a future answer. So then, question 1 was, which is the country that had the first winning song not in that country's own language? Well, this was in 1974. That was the first year that they relaxed the rule about you have to perform a song that is in your nation's language. And the country that took advantage of that submitted probably the most famous Eurovision song and most successful Eurovision act by a long shot. Weren't they the lucky ones to take advantage of that rule? We are talking about the song Waterloo by ABBA, which of course represented Sweden. That song was in English throughout. Also the song in the following year, which was Ding a Dong by the Netherlands, that one in 1975, that took advantage of that rule that you can sing in English if you want to. 1976 was a song in English, but it was won by the UK, so therefore it would have passed the language rule anyway, even before the change. And then after that, for some reason, they changed the rule back, and it wasn't until the 90s, I think, that the rule was relaxed once more. By the way, we should make an honourable mention for Austria, because in 1966 they did submit a song called Merci Chérie, which of course sounds like it's going to be in French, but the title was the only thing in French. The rest of the lyrics were in German. So there we go. Sweden is the answer to question 1. Question 2. Let's just have a reminder. Which was the first song contest to be broadcast in colour? Well, I wonder if you guessed that this was the 1960s. It took place in 1968, which was a year when Spain went on to win, and the hosts were entitled to do so because they had won the previous year in 1967, of course. That winning song in 67 was Puppet on a String by Sandy Shaw, and so the host country in 68 was the United Kingdom. The venue was the Royal Albert Hall. Not actually the first time the UK had hosted. They previously hosted at BBC Television Centre on a year in the early 60s, before the normal pattern of you win and then you host in the following year really kind of was set in stone. Now, there were many questions that I could have asked about the UK, to tell you the truth. Not least one of my favourite facts about the UK, and I would say this because I'm from the UK. The UK has the record for coming second more times than anybody else. That has happened an astonishing 16 times. Now on to question 3. The first win for this country was not shown in a neighbouring country, who decided to cut the transmission when it became clear who the winner was going to be. Well, I'm speaking at the end of 2025, when there is currently discussion about, is Israel going to take part in the next contest, and if they do, some countries may withdraw, whereas if they don't, other countries may withdraw. It's a real hot potato at the moment, and Israel was at the centre of this little controversy in the year 1978. Let's just pop our blob on Israel. The winning song that year was Abba Nebi by Isaac Cohen. Fantastic disco song. I mean, a more 70s song you will not hear. And the neighbour who was broadcasting, many of the countries on the fringes of Europe are members of the European Broadcasting Union, who produce the song contest, and so therefore they do broadcast it. And I think some of them go to an advert break or something when it's Israel's turn, and so they even today they probably do their best to pretend that Israel's not in it. And this was the case in 1978. Jordan, who then were not friendly with Israel, they pulled the transmission when it became clear that Israel was going to win, and they replaced the programme with a still image of a vase of flowers, I believe. And they later said in their TV news that the country that came second, Belgium, was actually the winner. So the current argument about Israel, it is old news in Eurovision circles. And question 4, which is the country that has come last the most times in the grand final? Well, a certain country is synonymous with the phrase nul point, and for good reason, because it is the answer to this question. Yes, I'm afraid so. Sorry, Norway. Norway has come last in the grand final on that Saturday night 12 times. 12! Goodness me. And 4 of those have been with 0 points. Nul points. Probably the most notorious of them is the man with the red trousers jumping up and down into a strange sort of semi-splits. Did he even do the splits at the end? I think he might have done. Jan Tegan in 1978, actually the same year that we were just talking about when Israel won. Yes, he represented Norway. He scored no point. The remarkable thing about him and the Norwegian broadcaster is that they invited him back twice more when he did score a little bit better. I should say, and I don't know if Austrians will be happy for me to say this, but they also have scored 0 points 4 times in the grand final, but Norway exceeds them in terms of finishing last more times. So there you go. That's round 1. The first winning song, not in a native language, was from Sweden. The first broadcasting colour was by the United Kingdom. The first win, not broadcasted in a neighbouring country, was for Israel. And the nation who's come last the most times, that's Norway. Keep a note of your score for round 1 so that we can tot it up at the end. And let us move on to round 2. And this round I am calling semis. If you happen to be watching this and you're not so familiar with what the Eurovision Song Contest is, well, first of all, thank you so much, because what on earth are you doing still watching a video about Eurovision if you're not a super fan? I'm really touched that you're still here, thank you. You may not know that there is a semi-final, and there has been for about 20 years now, just to whittle down the number of potential participants. And so the next 4 questions are about the semi-finals. These days you get a semi-final on Tuesday and another one on Thursday, and teams from both qualify in for the grand final on Saturday. So question 5. Which is the only country that has always qualified from the semis? And there should be a footnote to that. Strictly speaking, they haven't always been in the semis, because on occasion they've qualified automatically for the grand final by dint of having won the previous year. But whenever they have been in the semi-finals, they have always succeeded in qualifying for Saturday night. So only one country can make that claim. Who is it? Question 6. Which is the only country that has never qualified from the semis? Again, only one country can make this sorry boast. Just one country has entered Eurovision and tried to get past the semi-finals, but not managed to do so. Question 7. Which country has had the longest streak of non-qualification from the semis? So the highest number of years in a row when they failed to get through. And it might surprise you because it is actually one of the most successful nations in the contest's history. And question 8. Which are the only 2 countries to get nul point in a semi-final? Nul point on Saturday night is the ultimate shame. It's the one everybody talks about, and that's partly because the scores on the board are not actually revealed on a semi-final night. You only learn who's got through and who hasn't, so nobody actually has the public disgrace of having a camera pointed at them whilst they are told that they received no points. However, the statistics are then published later, and there are 2 answers to that question because it has happened to 2 countries. So then, just a reminder, question 5, we're looking for the one country that has always qualified from the semi-final. Then in question 6 is the opposite, it's the one country that has never done so. Then in 7, the country that has failed to qualify the highest number of times in succession. And then number 8, the 2 countries that managed to leave the contest with no points at all in the semi-finals. And here's our map to help us. You've probably worked out the yellow shaded countries are those that have taken part in Eurovision, and 4 of them are no longer subject to our inquiries because we've had them as an answer already. Question 5 was, which country has always qualified from the semi-finals? Well, we could argue that this is the most successful Eurovision nation of the 21st century because they first took part in, I think it was 2003, and then they went on to win the following year. And of the 20 times that they have entered the Eurovision Song Contest up to 2025, they have been required to take part in the semi-finals 17 times. The other 3 times they qualified automatically for the Saturday night because they had won the previous year. And in those 17 semi-finals, they always managed to get through. That nation is Ukraine. It's difficult to compare scores from down the years because it hasn't always been the same scoring system, and various people have tried to express, the average points or the proportion of available points, or by some means compare on a par one year with another. And many people that try to do so do discover that Ukraine comes out top because they have done so well, winning 3 times in their 20-year history, and as I say, always getting through to Saturday night. Question 6. Oh dear. Sorry to the residents of the country coming up, but it is the opposite of what we were just saying. The only country that has never made it through to a Saturday night. This country has entered Eurovision 6 times, from 2004 through to 2009, when, not without great surprise, they decided that they'd stop wasting their time because they had not been succeeding. Their best performance was in 2007 when they came 12th in a semi-final, which was not sufficient to qualify. That song was called Salvem Allemand, which means let's save the world. It is a song in Catalan submitted by Andorra. Heavily encouraged by the broadcaster of the government of Catalonia in northeastern Spain, who of course want to have a presence of Catalan in the song contest. There is a little footnote to that, by the way, that the song that won for Spain in 1968, La La La, was sung in Spanish because this was Spain under the regime of Franco, but the first singer who was chosen to sing that song wanted to do so in Catalan and was told, no, you can't, and therefore he refused to take part. He and his contemporaries may have been proud to see Catalan in the semi-finals, but obviously disappointed that it never got its airing on Saturday. Question 7 was, which nation has the longest streak of non-qualifications from the semi-finals? That is to say, the highest number of years in a row when they failed to make it. I mentioned that this is actually one of the most successful Eurovision nations. They have won 5 times over the years, stretching all the way back to the 1950s. I think it was even the second year of the contest when this country won for the first time. And they have won as recently as, well, it would be 2019, because the 2020 contest was due to take place in Rotterdam, wasn't it? For yes, we are talking about the Netherlands. This is probably part of the Netherlands' Eurovision legacy that they don't choose to bang on about, but 8 times in a row from 2005 through to 2012, they didn't make it through the semi-finals. They finally did the following year, 2013, and actually in 2014 they came second with a lovely gentle song called Calm After the Storm. That would be right at home in ASMR land. And question 8, we're looking for 2 answers here. This is very, very difficult to guess if you don't know. You either know this or you don't. Which are the only 2 countries that have managed to score 0 points in the semi-finals? It actually happened to 2 countries in the same semi-final in the same year, and that year was 2023, when both San Marino, and that is so tiny on the map, I hope I'm going to get this in the right place, and also Romania. Sorry to say, they both came away from their semi-final with nothing at all. And I'm pretty sure, do correct me if you know me to be wrong, I think that is the only time when anyone has ever managed to score 0 points in a semi-final. When I double-checked that in researching this quiz, I sort of assumed, well, it must have been the night when the song that would eventually go on to win was in the semi-final, and therefore that scored all the points. But no, it was the song when Lorraine's Tattoo would win for Sweden, and that was actually in the other semi-final. The song that won the semi-final that eliminated San Marino and Romania was actually Australia's Voyage, and I can't even remember that song. It came 9th on the Saturday night, so it's bizarre scoring in that semi-final, to say the least. So to recap, it is Ukraine who have always qualified from the semi-final. It is Andorra who have never done so. It is the Netherlands who didn't qualify for the most years in succession, 8 years in a row. And we have Romania and San Marino as the only countries to score 0 points in the semi-finals. So, another 5 of the countries on our map are no longer in contention. How are you doing? Do keep a note of your score for round 2 so that we can add it at the end. And let's move on to round 3. And I'm going to go down to 3 questions per round now, just because we've got such a range of interesting things to cover. And round 3 is going to be about hosts. Hosts. So, question 9. Which country is home to the venue that has hosted the most times? Of course, any Eurovision fan will know which countries have won the most times. Do you know who has hosted the most times? And does that help you identify which individual venue has hosted more than any other? Question 10. Which former Yugoslav republic hosted after Yugoslavia won in 1989? And of course I include that as an honorary mention because Yugoslavia is one country that is, strictly speaking, not on our map, even though they did take place in Eurovision for many years. And question 11. Which is the only country that has won the contest but never hosted it? There is only one possible answer to that. So, how well do you know your Eurovision hosts? I'm not talking about the actual people, I'm talking about the host cities. So to recap, we're looking for the individual venue that has hosted more than any other. We're looking for the former part of Yugoslavia that has hosted the competition and did so after Yugoslavia won in 1989, and also the only country to win the contest, but decided not to host it. Well, let's have a look. We're looking for the venue that's hosted the most times. Now, I'm sure you know, if you're a super fan and you're still watching this, at the time of recording at any rate, following the 2025 contest, Sweden and Ireland are joint leaders with 7 wins each. That does mean that they have also hosted that many times. However, there is another country that has hosted more times, and it is the UK. The UK has hosted on, I think, 4 out of the 5 years following it wins. The reason it didn't host following one of them is that you had a 4-way tie in 1969, and the UK didn't host the following year. But the UK has also deputised for other nations who decided not to host, and so it's the UK who's hosted more than any other nation. However, we know that the UK has already been taken as a possible answer in this quiz, so it cannot be the answer here. So, Sweden has also been taken. It's hosted 7 times, and indeed some of its cities, indeed some of its specific venues have hosted more than once. I think the Globen in Stockholm has hosted more than once. In fact, we go to Ireland for the answer to this question. 7 times winners, 7 times host, and in 1994, 1995 and 1997, the Eurovision Song Contest came from the Point Theatre in Dublin. So certainly at the time of recording, it is Ireland that has the venue that's hosted more than any other. Question 10. Who hosted when Yugoslavia had won in 1989? And this is a bit of an honorary mention for reasons that will become clear a little later. I did want to mention the fact that Yugoslavia won. Yugoslavia took place for took part for something like 25 years, I think. And of course, they were doing so right up to the moment of the breakup of Yugoslavia. Indeed, it was only a few years before that they won. So they hosted in 1990. Well done if you remembered that took place in Zagreb, which of course now is the capital of Croatia. So, Croatia, I'll try to put it more or less where Zagreb is actually. There we go. Croatia. Modern day Croatia, or Yugoslavia as it then was the host in 1990. Great knowledge if you knew that. And question 11 was, which is the only nation that won the contest but decided not to host it? There have actually been quite a few occasions when winning nations did not then host the contest. Among them, there were several occasions when a host country didn't have a venue big enough. There are some examples of countries winning back-to-back or several times within a period of only a few years, and so they didn't want to spend the money again. And there's even some examples where a winning country did not take part in the following year. This is the first of those scenarios. This is a country that won the competition in 1971, but it's the tiniest of countries and they didn't have a venue large enough for hosting, and so the BBC stepped in and hosted in Edinburgh in 1972. Who was that winning country in 1971 then? Well, the song was Un banc, un arbre, une rue, and the country in question was Monaco. Excellent knowledge if you got that one. And so, just to recap again, the venue that has hosted more than any other is the Point Theatre in Dublin in Ireland. So Ireland's the answer to question 9. The 1990 contest following Yugoslavia's win was in Zagreb in modern-day Croatia, and Monaco is the only country that has won but never hosted. How did you do in round 3? Hope you're keeping your score, and if you've got 11 out of 11 so far, well, that's frankly amazing. Now, what should we have for our next round? For our 4th round, I'm calling this For the Longest Time. Nothing to do with Billy Joel, although if he were to take part in Eurovision, wouldn't that be amazing? Seems unlikely. I wonder if he even knows what it is. So, question 12. Which country has taken part the most times? There is no country that has taken part in every Eurovision Song Contest. This one has done so in every one, bar one of them. And that is at the time of recording. There is great speculation over who's going to take part in 2026 as I speak, including the nation that we're talking about there. Question 13. Which country has entered the most times without ever winning? And that is the difference between those two questions, because 12 is the country that's entered the most times, but they have also won it. 13 is the country that has failed to win, but entered more times than any other entrants who have not managed to win it. And question 14. Which is the big 5 member that won the longest time ago? And in the very slim scenario that you're still watching and you don't really know what Eurovision is and therefore not sure what the Big Five means, well, we talked about semi-finals earlier. There are 5 nations who don't have to take part in the semi-finals because they contribute the largest amount of money to the European Broadcasting Union. And it's worth saying, by the way, that that doesn't mean that they're just paying for a pass to the final of the Eurovision Song Contest. The EBU provides the infrastructure for live television of any sort, so live sport, live news is all provided by the EBU, and so it's that is being paid for by the Big Five. As a reward, those countries do get to go straight to the final on the Saturday of the Song Contest. And the Big Five are UK, Spain, France, Italy, and Germany. So we're looking for one of those as the answer. So a reminder of those questions. Question 12, which country has taken part more than any other? 13, who has taken part more than any other but not managed to win? And which of those Big Five nations won the longest time ago? So then, let us think about who has taken part the most times. It is one of the nations who took part in the inaugural Eurovision Song Contest in 1956. There were 7 countries that took part in that. They were the Benelux countries, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, France, Germany, Switzerland, and Italy. So we can narrow it down to those 7. And the UK, by the way, didn't take part in that one. They also didn't take part, I think, in 1958. It was something to do with just not getting their act together. They just didn't get around to it, didn't feel it was important. If it weren't for that sloppiness, the UK would rival Germany in terms of participating the most times. For Germany is the answer to this question. Germany did take part in the first one, and they have officially entered in every year but one. But unofficially, they have entered every time up to 2025. And that is to say, in all of the 69 song contests up to 2025, they have said, yep, we'll take part, please. However, there is one year that is a sort of a blot on the landscape, not just for Germany, but in my mind, a blot for Eurovision itself, because it was a stupid decision in 1996 to whittle down the number of possible entrants by means of a pre-televised qualification round. Starting in 1993, you started to see increased interest from more countries in participating, and there were obviously going to be too many songs for the Saturday night show. So they started to experiment with ways to eliminate some people. And this has evolved, as we've heard, into the semi-finals of today, but they tried various other means in terms of eliminating people, including if you finish near the bottom one year, you're relegated the next year, and a load of mad stuff. Well, in 1996, some bigwigs from the EBU basically sat in a room and listened to all of the songs that wanted to enter and decided on a bunch of them that they were just going to throw out there and then. One of them was Germany. And not only is that a real shame for the official record, because officially, therefore, Germany did not enter in 1996, but also Germany has one of the largest populations in Europe, therefore one of the biggest TV audiences, and the EBU decided to boot them out. It was bizarre. Still, it's not necessarily the most bizarre thing that the EBU has decided to do. That is a hot contest. Question 13 is slightly less contentious. Which country has entered the most times without ever winning? Well, for many years, the answer to that question was Portugal, who I think entered a massive 48 times before they did finally win in 2017 with the sublime Amar Peros Dois by Salvador. What a beautiful song that was. A standout winner that year, finally bringing to an end Portuguese fans' misery after 48 years. And so who now takes the honour? Well, they're not far behind, to tell you the truth. 41 times since first entering in 1981. Cyprus have failed to win the thing. They came really close in 2018. Fuego, another great song, that came second. In fact, there was a moment in that 2018 final when it seemed as if this record of longest serving participant without a win would be broken for the second year in a row, because Portugal had broken their dark in 2017, and it really looked as if Cyprus stood a chance in 2018. But it was the year when Neta's Toy won for Israel instead. And question 14, which of the big five nations is the one that won the longest time ago? Well, working backwards, Italy is the most recent of them to win. Måneskin in 2021. Germany last won in 2010. That was Lena with Satellite. Then we go back to 1997 when Katrina and the Waves won for the UK. France won in 1977. And my mind has gone blank. Oh, I can see that lady now. She had a yellow dress on. I can't think what she was called. And I can't remember what the song's called. Je suis désolé. If you are French and you're shouting that at your device, stick it in the comments if you like. What was the song that won for France in 1977? Well, anyway, that's the last time that France won. But it is Spain that won the longest time ago out of those nations that are now entitled to go straight into the grand final. They won in 1969, although so did three others. There was a four-way tie. It was Salome's Vivo Cantando that won in 1969. We could also go back to the previous year, 1968, when Spain won outright with that song that I mentioned earlier, La La La. So, just to recap then, in that round we had Germany, who have taken part more than any other country, Cyprus, who've entered the most times without winning, and Spain, the Big Five member that won the longest time ago. Spanish Eurovision fans may claim, well, I don't care what you say, the Junior Eurovision Song Contest has been won by Spain, I think even more than once. I must admit, I mean, no offence to Junior Eurovision, but I I'm so enveloped in the joy of the Eurovision in May. I just can't face taking any step towards trying to get into Junior Eurovision because I know it's a slippery slope. And as soon as I start, I know I will not be able to stop. Let's go on to the next round, which is round 5. And I am going to call this round People. Now, I did say earlier that we're not asking for you to name any particular song or person, but I will mention some people and ask you to mention their countries. Question 15. Which country was tipped to win in 2020, when, of course, the Eurovision Song Contest, like most things, was cancelled due to COVID? And then they also missed out on performing live in 2021, also due to COVID. I remember the sorry sight of those poor participants who, on the biggest night of their musical lives, probably were doomed to sit in their hotel room as a video of their performance was played on the television. Question 16. Which country entered the youngest singer ever to win? And that sort of paved the way for the previously mentioned Eurovision, Junior Eurovision, because this particular singer, I think it was even claimed that she was a little older than she actually was, and when it was revealed how young she was, people started to say, maybe there should be a minimum age limit. And then some years later, there surfaced the idea of a contest for children. So who was that young singer? And question 17. Which country has won 5 times, but never with a singer that actually came from that country? Let's phrase it like that. They've only ever won with foreign singers. Let's just go through those questions again as you give it some thought. Which country's act was tipped to win in 2020? And then the same act did represent that country the year later, but sadly they were unable to perform live because they were stranded in their hotel room with COVID. Which country fielded the youngest ever singer who won the contest? And which country won 5 times? It must be said, those 5 times were quite a long time ago. And none of the 5 singers in question were from that country. So then let's go back to 2020 and 2021. That awful time of COVID when everything was cancelled, and of course countries started to go into lockdown in about March of that year, by which time Eurovision was all set, the songs had been chosen, the host venue was ready to go, and it became very obvious that the competition couldn't go ahead, and so it was cancelled. The song that was tipped to win that year was called Think About Things, and it was by a group called Daddy Og Gagnan Magnized. I'm so sorry, my Icelandic is not what it should be. We are talking about Iceland. Well, thankfully for good old Daddy, he did go on to represent Iceland the following year in 2021, but the rule was that they had to find new songs. I think there were suggestions at the time that they could just take the 2020 songs forward, because any song that's entered into Eurovision must only have been made commercially available within the previous 12 months, I think. But since everybody was on a level playing field, some people were saying, well, you just move everybody forward and nobody has an advantage. But for one reason or another, the wise old EBU said, nope, you can submit the same singers if you like, but they must provide new songs. And Daddy's song 10 Years was not quite the hit that Think About Things was expected to be, and so therefore they didn't win. And poor old Daddy and his group were even unable to take part on the night. 16, which was the country whose singer was the youngest winner ever? Well, I'm talking about the lady in the white jacket and I think it was pink trousers, if I remember rightly. I say lady, she was only 13 years old when she sang J'aime la vie, and that was on behalf of Belgium in 1986. Sandra Kim was her name, and of course she's still occasionally wheeled out on Eurovision night because she was only 13 in 1986, so she's still a sprightly young thing. It wasn't until the 21st century, I think, that Junior Eurovision came along, but that 13-year-old, purporting to be slightly older, did lead to a new rule about the minimum age of a participant on the main Eurovision night. Question 17. Which country won 5 times, but all of their winning singers were foreigners? Well, if you don't know straight away, let me list the singers for you, and then I will pick the country out of the map. The singers in question were Jean-Claude Pascal, who won in 1961 with a song called Nous les Amoureux. France Gaulle, she won in 1966 with Poupée de cire, Poupée de sang. You've got Anne-Marie David, 1973 winner with Tu te reconnaîtras, and Corinne Hermé, winning in 1983. That song was Si la vie est cadeau. Those songs were all sung by French people. Those 4 people were French, but they were not representing France. If you're a super fan, you will have spotted that I missed one out, and that is because the winner in 1972 was Vicky Leandros, and she, singing Après toi, although she was singing in French, she was from Greece. None of those people were from the country who was paying them to be there, and that is Luxembourg. Luxembourg, who very soon after their most recent win in 1983 decided to pack up and go home, only to return many, many years later, and they're now back in the fold, it seems. And good for them. I wonder if they will win a 6th time. So our answers in round 5. Iceland was tipped to win in 2020 and didn't quite manage to produce such a hit in 2021. Question 16, the youngest singer to win was from Belgium, and 17, it was Luxembourg who won 5 times, but always with singers from another country. So, quite a few of the countries that we started out with are now not available as potential answers. We are, of course, not going to include every single yellow country on this map. There will be a good 20 or so spares, and who knows, that might give us the opportunity for another quiz. But let's go into our last round, which I am going to call debuts. And so, question 18. Which country smuggled their performers out of their country in order to make their debut? And that happened in 1993, if that helps you. Who would be smuggling people out of their own country and their own capital city in 1993? Question 19. Which is the only country that has only taken part once? And therefore, their debut was also their only entry. And here's a little clue for that too. That country is not in Europe. That might help you if you're not a Eurovision fan and you've been looking at the map thinking, well, why are there some countries on there that are not in Europe? Well, that's why. And 20. The last question. Which 2 countries won on their debut? This is my favourite question of all, because it may produce arguments. I am going to argue that they did no such thing. They are officially credited with winning on their debut, but I'm saying no, they didn't. See if you can work out why. To recap then, 18 is the country that smuggled their participants out in order to make their debut in 1993. 19 is the only country whose debut was their only ever entry, and 20 is the 2 countries that officially won on their debut, but I would suggest that we could look at it a different way. So then, we go back to 1993, when, for the first time, countries from what had been the communist area of Eastern Europe began to express an interest in taking part in Eurovision. And coincidentally, this is the first year that I watched the Eurovision Song Contest, and I was captivated by the fact that you had maps and flags and stats on the screen. I mean, the music was sort of a secondary interest, which I've come to be more interested in over the years, but it was really the geography of it that fascinated me at the time. And also there was something very newsworthy about a particular country taking part in 1993, because the singers who were making their way to, oh goodness, where did it take place? Who had won in 1992? Come on, old chap, you should know that. That was in Ireland, wasn't it? Because Ireland's successful streak in the 90s, the first of them was in 1992. Oh yes, and it was in Mill Street. It was in some old barn on a farm in rural Ireland. That's it. Well, among the participants on that evening was the group who had somehow managed to get out of Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Of course, that city was under siege at the time. The airport was only open to United Nations traffic, and the city was blockaded, and food, supplies, and sometimes people could only come and go by means of a tunnel that was dug underneath the airport runway. You can actually go and visit that tunnel if you are ever in Sarajevo. It's fascinating. And in that year, Bosnia, against the odds, somehow managed to make their debut at Eurovision, and there was a tremendous reception for them on the night, not just when they sang their song, but also when a representative of Bosnia appeared on the phone at the end of the evening to give the scores for that country. The crowd went wild. The song that Bosnia sang on that night, and you will forgive my poor pronunciation, I hope, it was called Sva bol svijeta, and it means all the pain in the world, or the whole world's pain. I've seen both those translations, and of course, although we didn't really know it because most of us don't speak their language, it was all about the pain of the Bosnian War. So the so-called non-political Eurovision Song Contest was political from the word go as soon as Eastern Europe came along. Question 19. Which country has only taken part once? And oh dear, politics again. And politics right up to the minute as well. This particular country that made a debut and then never came back did so in 1980. They came 18th out of 19 on that night and presumably went off in disgust. Although there is a second reason why they have not taken part in other years, and that is because it is one of those countries who refuse to have anything to do with a certain other one. It's the one that is still contentious. Israel had won in 1979, but they were unable to take part in 1980 because the date chosen for the Eurovision Song Contest was their National Memorial Day, and therefore it was inappropriate to screen a barking mad song competition on the telly. much less host one and take part in it. So I think it was the Netherlands that hosted it instead, and one of the Arab nations who had been on the periphery of Europe and been interested in taking part, but had always said, oh, well, we'll only take part if Israel's not there. Well, they seized the opportunity to do so. We're talking about Morocco. We might say that it was their poor performance on the night that dissuaded them from coming back, but it's more likely that because Israel came back in 1981, then Morocco did not. As for 2026 conversations about Israel, well, we shall have to see. And question 20 was, what are the two countries that won on their debut? Well, if you look at the official statistics, then there are two countries that can make that claim. And of course, the first answer is the one that won the first song contest. That stands to reason. That is Switzerland. It happened to take place in Switzerland as well, but Les Asias Refrain was the winning song for Switzerland. And then you have the song that won in 2007, which was the superb Molitva, sung by Maria Serifovic. She was competing on behalf of Serbia. And strictly speaking, if the record books are to be believed, that is the first time that Serbia took part. But I would venture to suggest that on both occasions, Switzerland 1956, Serbia 2007, we could argue that it was not their debut at all, for two very different reasons. In 2007, it was Serbia taking part. But in 2004 and 2005, there was a country called Serbia and Montenegro that took part. And of course, for all of those years in the 70s and 80s, Yugoslavia had taken part. Well, the key thing to remember here is that it's not actually the country that is participating in Eurovision, it is the national broadcaster that is taking part. And okay, the television and radio station based in Belgrade, who is now the national broadcaster of Serbia and was so upon the creation of Serbia as we now know it, well, they may have taken part in their current form in 2007, but you're not telling me that nobody from that organisation was involved in previous years when it was called Serbia and Montenegro, or indeed when it was called Yugoslavia. In fact, the interesting thing about Yugoslavia is that the constituent parts, which would then break up into independent countries, they each had their own broadcaster, and I think they alternated responsibility for providing the entrant or for contributing financially whilst Yugoslavia was taking part. So officially Serbia made their debut in 2007 and won, but I want to suggest that there were people involved that had been involved in Eurovision before. If you know me to be talking absolute hogwash and would like to tell me so, please leave a comment and I will stand corrected. As for 1956, well, there's no arguing with that one, and that is because technically Switzerland's debut did not win. And that's because there were 7 countries taking part and they each performed 2 songs. I'm not sure if each of those 7 countries had the same singer do both songs, but that was the case for Switzerland. Lisa sang both of the Swiss songs, and it was the second of them, Refrain, which won the night. Therefore, we can say that the first Swiss song, namely their debut song, did not win. So, who smuggled their participants out of their country to make their way to Eurovision in 1993? That was Bosnia and Herzegovina. Who only took part once? That was Morocco. And which 2 countries won on their debut, although also they didn't? That's Switzerland and Serbia. What fun to end on an argument. And by the way, if you're new to Eurovision and you've been looking at this map thinking, wait a minute, what's Australia doing there? That's not in Europe. Well, no, indeed. They were invited as a guest one year and they kind of never went away. And we should count ourselves lucky for it because they've produced some stonking performances ever since. Maybe they will win someday. Well, if you've stayed to the end, thank you very much, and I will be delighted to hear if you got 20 out of 20. If you didn't, don't be ashamed. Even if you got 1 out of 20, I think that is cause for celebration. And if you fancy more Eurovision quizzing, do follow the link which is about to pop up for the piano medley of winning songs from 1956 up to 2016. And if you'd like to press like or subscribe and join me for another gentle jaunt around the world, whether about Eurovision or something else, then I'll see you next time here on Travel Trivia ASMR. Bye for now.